Hey friends, did you know that Feminist Frequency recently launched the Games and Online Harassment Hotline? Well, we sure did. It is a confidential, text-based emotional support resource for folks who make and play games. You can learn more at gameshotline.org, and please, please help us spread the word so we can reach the people who need it the most.
There is a moment where you're actually questioning, like, is this going to be too hard for her? Not too physically hard, but too emotionally difficult to leave, her vulnerable daughter. You never get the sense that that would ever be a question for Mike, and nor do we expect it to.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two women who you can definitely count on to do all the cooking on the International Space Station. Carolyn Pettit.
Do they even have cooking on the International Space Station?
We're going to find out.
Okay.
And Ebony Adams.
Hey.
This week we're going to be talking about the new film Proxima. Pro-eczema.
Oh my God.
I'm anti-eczema, personally. I don't know why you're pro-eczema, Anita, but it's weird.
I can't wait to face off with you about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned. Hello, friends.
Hello.
Hi. Anything happened since last week?
I don't know.
Nothing big. No news to report.
No.
I don't know. I heard some honking, but I live in a city, so that's pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
Honking
That
all
was just
day
me
long
going by your
for
house
7 hours.
being like, what's up, Anita? Put some pants on.
How dare you tell me what to do and how to
Listen,
live my life?
I'm doing it for you. I've gotten many calls from your neighbors about you walking to the bodega
How
wearing
dare
no
you
pants.
solicit my neighbors to spy on me?
I don't
What is
solicit.
this?
This is the thing. They found my number and reached out to me. And frankly, I didn't want to wade into these waters.
This bit went on way too long. And it was
I think
so bad.
let's keep it going. Let's talk about it. We're recording this on Monday, November 9th, over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Election was called, baby.
Election was called.
Hell yeah.
I truly didn't think the news was going to come out over the weekend. I thought we were just going to be in limbo for much longer. And I literally had forgotten about the 2000 election and how long we waited for those, like the confirmation of court results. In my mind, it hadn't gone on but it went on for 4 weeks back then. So I was like, man, they're going to pull that shit on us again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so for posterity's sake, the election happened on last Tuesday, and then it took until Saturday for a winner to be declared.
For those of you who are listening to this in 2027, when you're going through the vault, the classics.
Exactly. Or someone who wants to weigh in on the pro versus anti-eczema debate in 25 years.
You know what? No,
that didn't work. I'm sorry. I had to try though, right? No, I guess I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. This was an interesting week. And this shit would have been called so much faster if everyone wasn't on edge, right? Like the news stations took a real long time to call it because there was so much concern about like Trump and his like legal team and, blah, 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 like all of the threats that he made. Oh yeah.
Oh, and him, let's be clear, Trump being the colossal egomaniacal baby that he is continuing to has no plans to concede the election and is in fact continuing to stir up, just to toss misinformation and lies out into the American public and to rile up his supporters into believing, although it's completely baseless and untrue, that the election was stolen from him and that this is like an example of large-scale conspiratorial fraud being perpetrated, against him. And because his ego will simply not allow him to accept the reality that he has lost, and he doesn't give a fuck how much damage that his tantrums and his lies and his bullshit fuel at all, because all that matters to him is himself.
You know what has been really actually kind of stunning to realize is how much, even within my admittedly like liberal progressive bubble, how much of like Trump's statements and speeches and tweets and everything had penetrated, you know, into my consciousness despite my best efforts, and the way that really kind of abruptly stopped. You know, I mean, it seemed as if for a while, like you could not be following Trump on Twitter, but people would still be like retweeting and trying to dunk on him, or, you know, the news would like cut away to Trump statements or whatever. And it just seemed as if like suddenly like we weren't giving him any air anymore. And it was so welcome. And I mean, let's be clear, like I'm tremendously grateful that the dude was voted out, but I'm not super excited about Biden. Like the dude is absolutely a centrist, you know, and like, you know, I got more progressive ideals than that. But also like this election, it was way too close. I mean, there shouldn't have been nobody voting for Trump. So the fact that like it was as close as it was, like we need to reckon with that shit, America. Come on.
We absolutely do. I mean, and I'm going to talk a bit about that maybe a little bit later in the podcast. But at the same time, I mean, and there's no denying that. Like we have to reckon with you know how many of us just love white supremacy and love power and you know all of those things. But at the same like statistically, there's also the reality that like by American election standards, it's not close. Like you know the fact that I think 4.5 million more people voted for Biden than Trump is like a very you know measured against other American elections, that is a very significant margin of victory.
I think what's interesting is the breakdown of who voted for who.
Like I absolutely you're gonna hoped and thought that we would see a more just a more full scale repudiation of Trump, and it was heartbreaking, you know, in those early days that to not get that, and to you know, for me as, you know, as a trans person, for instance, and for so many of us for so many different reasons, to have to like once again have to come to terms with the fact that, oh, right, like basically half of this country at least has no regard whatsoever for, you know, my marginalization, my humanity. Like, you know, an administration can persecute me or dehumanize me, and it doesn't shift the needle at all. Like, or in fact, it is a net positive. So like having to I think a lot of us are going to be dealing with the psychic pain and really, you know, the kind of trauma of that, of again, being reminded of what America actually is, you know, and facing it so directly for some time.
Yeah. I can't wait to chop this up at the end of the episode.
Yeah, cool.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no.
Larger discussion.
I think it's good. I think we should get into the film for sure. But let's talk about this more in the freakouts.
Hey,
yeah.
Okie dokie. Alice Winocour, whose name I cannot pronounce. Sorry. Her new film is Proxima, which focuses on Sarah, played by Eva Green, an astronaut making preparations for her departure to the International Space Station, and how being a woman and a mother complicates her time at a Russian training camp. The American mission leader, Mike, played by Matt Dillon, an actor who makes playing assholes seem effortless, which is a little worrying, I suppose, is casually misogynist.
I didn't mean to suggest,
Sarah.
I didn't mean to cast aspersions on Matt Dillon, the human being. I just think he has made a career, you know.
And he's so good at it.
Yeah, he's good at it. And, you know.
I agree. Matt Dillon is great at playing an asshole, which just always makes me a little like, you know, if you're that good at it, I don't know.
Hopefully it's not
everybody.
Hopefully it's not a James Woods.
Not everybody is a James Woods situation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I like. James Woods, when I was growing up, was an actor who I'm like, wow, I love watching him play assholes. He's so good at it. He makes it so compelling. And, you know, turns out he's truly a colossal asshole. But I don't think Matt Dillon is necessarily that way at all. Anyway.
But you don't know.
You don't know.
Don't be spreading rumors here. Matt Dillon might be an asshole. You don't know. Okay, so Matt Dillon plays this guy named Mike, and he is casually misogynist towards Sarah, sometimes treating her with kid gloves and sometimes being overly tough on her. Meanwhile, Sarah's young daughter, Stella, I love the name Stella, goes on an entire emotional journey of her own, struggling with separation from her mother and adjusting to staying with her father in Germany, away from her friends and the life that she knows. Rather than really being about space, Proxima is concerned first and foremost with the challenges women face in balancing the personal and the professional, and with the gravitational pull between mother and daughter, how they orbit each other, and how an interruption in that orbit impacts them both. Carolyn,
Yes.
You're such a poet.
Thank you. Speaking of poetry, I guess I'll start by saying that I expected, when I first started watching this film, I expected it to be something quite different from what it is. I expected something more lyrical. I expected and really what this film is, and it's lingered. As I think about it more after watching it, I appreciate it more. It's very, it almost is documentary-like in its attempt to be very authentic. It's filmed at a real space training facility in Russia, and we see Eva Green, her body and her, as Sarah going, doing all of these things that are physically taxing and that are, it has a very naturalistic and kind of, again, documentary approach to it. I think both in terms of its approach to the work, the nuts and bolts work of how do these people prepare for their mission to the ISS, and even in terms of the acting. There's a great moment where between Sarah and her ex-husband, who she has, Thomas, with whom she has it's a warm, as far as exes go, they seem to have a fairly good relationship, and where she goes to tell Thomas that he's going to have to take Stella for a while because she's going to space, and he asks her what's up, why are you here, and basically, and all she has to do is smile, and he knows her so well, and that smile conveys so much that he immediately knows oh my god, you're going to space, you're flying, those. It's just, I found it very, very human in that way, and very in a very different way from the film we talked about last week. First Cow is unfettered and kind of, in its approach to things. This film, it similarly feels a bit kind of stripped down and just going for an authentic approach to the characters and the story that it's telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to just point out something that you said for context, is that this is, I think, the first time a film has been the Russian Star City where astronauts actually train, and also, I'm sorry, this was filmed there, as Carolyn said. It was also filmed at the launch site in Kazakhstan, and it was also filmed at the European Space Center. And these were places that hadn't previously ever had filming done inside of them, especially for narrative fiction. So it was, I think there's something really special about it, and you can feel that in the movie. These are real locations with real history, where these, the tools that you see and the training and the, it's all real, right? And I think that that's part of what lends this feeling as well, in some ways, as to what you're talking about, the documentary style. It's not sensational. It's not our imagination of what it looks like. It's these are really the spaces, no pun intended, that exist. And also, I think it's really interesting that it's not NASA, right? That NASA dominates so much of our media and pop culture understanding of space travel, especially as Americans, but generally, I think NASA's the space body that people know the most. And so I really kind of liked that it was outside of that. The only attachment that we have to America in this is that the one of the crew members that's going to space is American, but that's it, right? It doesn't really matter outside of that. So I kind of liked that it decenters America in space travel.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah.
I really liked this movie. I had heard of it, but had done, no research into it. And, to be honest, before you recommended it, Anita, I don't know that it would have ended up on my to be watched list, but I'm very glad that I watched it, excuse me, for a lot of the reasons, some of which you've alluded to already. Caro, when you talk about like, the kind of naturalistic feel, and, Anita, when you reference, where it was shot. I loved how non-glossy it was. There's so many stories about space that really take on that kind of like, patina, that sheen, that kind of like hyper futuristic look that have no real weight behind them, but you get a sense of like the actual work involved and the tremendous like skill and like engineering prowess it has taken to develop what it needs to take our fragile human bodies, out into space. So I loved that, and I loved the work that Eva Green does to really situate you in how something like this feels. I think if you only know Eva Green from, past roles of hers, the expectation is, like a lot of, women in the screen industries, that like she has somehow like uglified herself for this role, right? Like this is not a glamorous role for Eva Green, who's really known for playing a lot of really, very beautiful, very glamorous characters. But I loved how like you could see the strain on her face and the toll this was taking on her body, but the almost like superhuman things that she is able to do, withstanding like a tremendous amount of G-force and, just, the 15 kilometers she runs per day. Like I was just in awe of her. And I think the film encourages that, encourages that recognition that like, this is simply amazing what humans have done and are doing, like the film wants us to constantly be in that mode as we watch these people prepare to go off into space. It was simply, and I'll tell you what else was amazing. And I say this to y'all every time I wind up watching some European crime drama. The easy way non-Americans slip between languages makes me jealous every goddamn time. Listen, Sarah is French. Homegirl is speaking French, German, English, Russian. I speak one language semi-fluently, and it would be hard for me to communicate technical information in my native tongue. I can't even imagine. And it's not like she's just giving you, here's how to make a box cakes mix. Like they're talking about really high level shit. I was just like, there are human brains that can actually do this stuff. There are human bodies that can do it. There are human brains that can do it. What am I doing? I got tired walking up the steps today. So how am I living my life?
I absolutely love being around people who are just like code switching
competence
language.
Porn. It's competence porn.
Well, that too, but also specifically the language thing. And I noticed that too, where you're just like, yeah, and that actually, it's so in the background, but also very present. So like her daughter at one point, she's like, why are you speaking German to me? Speak French to me. Like that's our language. And her daughter's using language to punish her mother, right? Like that's really, really interesting to me. I will also say that the language thing, so I've been really fortunate and I've met several astronauts and folks who work in the space industry. And these are some smart people. Just like you have to be incredibly smart to
they're
make
on
it.
another
So of
level.
course, so like learning a couple of languages is like, yeah, whatever in the grand scheme of the things that these people know. It's fascinating. But yeah, I really liked this film. I enjoyed it a lot. There's something about its pacing that felt it had movement, but it wasn't rushed, and it felt like there's definitely like conflict, right? It is paced like a film in as you would expect. Like there's conflict and there's resolution and tension and all of that, but so much of the tension is just Sarah, like doing her job and living her life. And I think that there's something magnificent about the pacing of the excitement, the reality of it, like trying to juggle. Like this is a movie about work-life balance, whatever the fuck that shit means, right? She just happens to be an astronaut. Right. She just happens to be that, like, she's doing something very physical. She's doing something very emotionally taxing. And like, she's afraid of like losing her daughter through this process, because her daughter's like 10, right? It's a very volatile age where you're still attached to your parents, but you're like learning how to separate. And so the fact that she's going to be gone for a year, and that it's potentially she's going to be gone for a year after this moment of like tension where she's not getting along with her kid because she can't be there for her, right? Like it's just, and sorry, one more thing too, as a part of that is there are all these little subtle things that I think make up so much meat of this movie and I don't mean meat in terms of the actual like content of it, but like the world building of it. So the subtle ways that misogyny plays out, but also the subtle ways where women are really celebrating each other, right?
Yeah.
And are there for each other. Little things about, she's getting a checkup and she's asked what she's going to do about her period, right? Does she want to stop it from happening, or does she want to continue having it in space? And that like using tampons is going to be deducted from the teeny tiny baggage quota that they have, right? Like those little things add to that. This is a movie about this woman and her life and like the things that she experiences in this context, right?
Not to be flippant, Anita, but did you have the same thought at that scene where you were like, my entire baggage quota would be pads and tampons? I decided to keep menstruating. I literally would not be able to bring anything else.
I honestly was like, a year? That's a lot of space. Like I did also have
a lot of
that.
space
I was like,
tampons.
Yeah. And then, I wish they had shown some of that when they showed the box, like they showed the actual case. I'm assuming that the baggage quota is like her maybe it's not a part of personal effects. Maybe it's a part of like clothes or something. I don't know. What the fuck do I know? But it's a really nice touch, I think, to add to this movie that is like deeply about this cis woman and like what she's going through,
And and they ask her if she's going to cut her hair, or that many women who go to space, wind up cutting their longer hair off.
Which is such a weird microaggression too, right? Like it's this. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead, Caro.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. I mean, I really love this film's approach to those kinds of conflicts. I mean, the situation with Mike, the Matt Dillon character, I think in a more traditional film, it would, we would see it come to some kind of head, and maybe there'd be some sort of like, maybe, I don't know, girl power kind of moment or whatever, where she like tells him off and like puts him in his place or what have you. But, instead what we get is like, she just kind of navigates his misogyny in the way that I think so many women have to do with male coworkers, in the workplace, maybe in positions of power above them. And of course, we don't know how that's going to evolve over the time that they are fucking stuck in space together. And
how many times did you think like, oh my God, I'm stuck in space with this person for a year? Like my life depends on this person. Did this cross your mind? Because I was like, this sounds like a fucking nightmare.
There would be a space murder.
but for the duration of the film, I mean, I think she makes those kind of little negotiations that a lot of women have to do of just like, just again, like finding ways to kind of make space for his misogyny rather, and which women, of course, shouldn't have to do, but nonetheless do often just do as a matter of course, as a way of like working and living in the world, right? Is just kind of like not fighting every battle, not like, whatever, and just kind of,
it's also, it's also interesting because it's like, she's not the first female astronaut. And in the credits, actually, I found it really moving that they showed all of these female astronauts and their kids, right? Like, but that even though there have been all of these like forebearers of women, I don't know if that's the right word, but of, not ancestors, whatever. There's all these other women that have gone to space before her, and there's all these other women that have been and continue to be a part of the space industry. But like that doesn't change the misogyny, right? It doesn't change the male dominated aspect of it, right? Like there's something deeply, I don't know, that sat with me a lot of like, it doesn't matter how many people came before you. Like, yeah, they created a little bit more space to make it a little bit easier for you, But at the same time, you're still dealing with like the contemporary flavor of misogyny, right? It might feel or look a little bit different.
One of the things that I really was super pleased with the way that the film handled it was the difference between Sarah and Naomi, Mike's wife. And the support available to him as a straight man in a relationship with a wife who will take care of his two sons while he is away. And I think it's important that it's not as if we don't see Mike as a loving father, but there's never this expectation that being a parent, being a husband, is going to intrude or infringe upon his dreams in the way that we do have a question. I think there's an actual there's a question in Proxima as to whether Sarah is going to change her mind. It's not a foregone conclusion that she is going to pursue her dream and, continue along this path. There is a moment where you're actually questioning, like, is this going to be too hard for her? Not too physically hard, but too emotionally difficult to leave, her vulnerable daughter. You never get the sense that that would ever be a question for Mike, and nor do we expect it to. And Mike, says he's got a military background, and he talks about, I think he had been deployed to Afghanistan. And, you think like, okay, so this is a guy who has been away from his family multiple times. And yet, again, the way that men are able to pursue, like personal fulfillment, the same kinds of requirements and responsibilities are never placed upon them. I mean, like you see Sarah, as this lone figure, having to watch her daughter and keep an eye on her daughter and, constantly wondering if she's going to get a chance to see her daughter before she goes into quarantine, or she's in all of these spaces and you see all of these men with their loving families around them, knowing that those families will take care of, the old homestead in their absence. Sarah doesn't have that. She truly is, having to do this on her own, as much as she does have the support of, her ex, Thomas. And yeah, they have a very amiable relationship, but it's completely different. And if she had chosen to not go into space, we would have completely understood it. Right? Like, this is a narrative that we know so well, like a woman choosing to place motherhood and her children above her own desires in a way that we would never expect that of a male character. If Mike, 2 days before launch had been like, yo, I can't do it, y'all. Like little Bobby and Billy, they need me too much. That would have been notable. It's almost unthinkable that would have happened.
Could you imagine being the daughter and being like, my mom didn't go to space because of me when you like grow up? Like no fucking way. I had a question, something that I didn't quite land on, and I was curious what you two thought about it. Mike is a dick to her for a big part of this film, and we get this moment where she's breaking down, right? Like a lot of stuff is coming at her at the same time, and she's really struggling. And like none of the men in her life are there for her. Like when she reaches out to her ex, he's just like, why the fuck are you calling me?
Yeah.
And like she has no one to go to. And she can't express vulnerability or fear, which doesn't necessarily mean she's not going to do it. Just that like she needs to be able to communicate her feelings to somebody. So Mike comforts her, right? They have this pretty extended moment where he like, she's like, do you need anything from the store? And he's like, I'll go with you. And he's like, there's no perfect astronaut. There's no perfect mother. Yeah. Like he's really comforting her. And they like, have a joke about magnets and shit. And I was like, but you're the asshole. So like, are you not an asshole anymore? Like, what is this? What do we do with this?
Yeah. I really liked that because I felt that it was, I felt like people are complex and multifaceted. Mm-hmm. And for me, it doesn't excuse his misogyny. But I think that our relationships in the real world with family members or with those who we have to work closely with, oftentimes, like, they're not simple and they're not cut and dry all the time. And sometimes we can find comfort, or solace or joy or whatever with a person with whom we have like very serious issues. I don't know.
I don't think I agree with you completely, and I liked that scene. I thought it was great. I think what I would have liked to see, it speaking to what you're talking about, was him continuing to be a dick sometimes. Right? Like, I would have liked to see one more moment of him saying something fucked up after that, to not be like, oh, you're okay now. It's just like, no, you're complicated, and this relationship is going to be complicated.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of a character in Mary Robinette Kowal's The Lady Astronaut series that I think is just fucking brilliant. Like, I don't know how she like captured this guy's misogyny and horrificness so well, but like, there is a man in her books, and he's like this, right? Like, he is kind of misogynist and racist and shitty, but he also has these moments of some comfort and some vulnerability, and then he goes right back into being a dick again. So you never know, as the recipient on the other side of that, like, you can't quite ever feel comfortable. And I think there's something very real about that many of us experience with people in our lives that hold some sort of power over us, or, hold privilege over us, that like, you never quite, you never know what to expect. It's almost abusive in some ways, because you're just always preparing for like, is the other shoe going to drop? Like, are we good now? Are we not? So I think that's what I would have wanted from this character. Although I don't think the film had time for it. Right? Like, it would have, I don't know where that would have entered in.
And I liked it. I was, kind of facetiously complaining about Matt Dillon in this movie, but it is precisely because he plays assholes so well. But I promise you, listeners, I can't separate reality from fiction. I appreciated that, he did have that moment. They were able to have that moment together, that conversation, that visit to the Russian store, because I think if they had, because the movie is, it's an hour and 45 minutes, if they had leaned too far into some of Mike's more asshole-ish behaviors, it might have made him more important to the story as a figure. It might have leaned a little bit more into completely villainizing him in a way that we start to think like, is he going to try and sabotage her, actually making it onto the mission? Is he going to be able to deal with her, whatever? And the story, is not really about that. It's about more than just the casual misogyny that she experiences from Mike, and that other, like, the Russian, like, basic drill sergeant character, whatever, who's also a total asshole. Can we talk about the kid?
Yes.
This little kid is so good. Yeah. Like, I was so impressed with, what's her name?
Zelia Boulant-Lemis.
Yeah. This is a hard role for kids. Like, and acting is, it's not an easy thing, but I was so impressed with her. Kira, when you talked about like the naturalism of the performances and the world that we see here, like, she's so good and so authentic, and conveying like her love for her mother and her closeness with her mother and her vulnerability and her anger when she feels as if she's not able to be close with her mother anymore and pulling away, but also her like childish delight and the two little boys that she meets and maybe making friends out of them. Like, I was so impressed with her performance.
Her face, Stella's face, when she sees the rocket at the end was like, that was feelings happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like the way that this film really honors Stella's journey as well as Sarah's journey, you know? And the final moments of the film but sort of belong to Stella. And there's a way in which, like, I think that there's such an emotional and psychological complexity to this film, and I think it's reflected in the final moments, and the final shots, which I really love, like, because they suggest a kind of liberation almost for Stella, and I like that. I think that I like that it sort of says, hey, yes, it's painful, yes, it's been difficult, but there's also, maybe for both of these characters, for Sarah and Stella, some growth in this process that they've gone through together, right?
There's that scene. So I had a moment where, so Sarah leaves quarantine.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that before we get into the specifics of it. Like, I just want to say that I read 2 reviews of this film before we're doing this podcast, and basically both of them essentially were like, this film is super great, and then the final 20 minutes like ruin it. And I do not necessarily, I don't agree with that, but I think we need to talk about like what it means that people are having that reaction and what happens in those final 20 minutes.
So what I was thinking, so astronauts have to quarantine, right? Before they can go into space. And we now know something about that in terms of like COVID isolation and quarantining and all of that. It's obviously a lot more severe, like a lot more lockdown, but it's I don't know. I think it's interesting that we have a little bit of an understanding of it now. And so Sarah breaks quarantine to go show her daughter the rocket because she had promised her daughter that they could see the rocket together. And there are reasons why that did not happen. I was like, when that happened, was like, fuck. Like, Sarah's a fuck up.
Yes.
And she's gonna get kicked off of like, she can't go back in because now she's been exposed to germs and all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it didn't play out that way.
Right.
So I think that there's like, for that, I was really concerned, and I was kind of like, this sucks. And like, they're making it like this mother, like the fathers would never do this, right? That it's like, you know, a mama bear kind of thing. Like, it bothered me. I didn't like it. And also, I don't think an astronaut would risk that. But I'm also like, this is a fucking movie, and it was very powerful. And the scene and the moment of it all was really like impactful as character development for both of them to create, tension and all of that. So yeah. I landed on thinking it was fine, and that it was actually like the two of them together going on this like clandestine trip to like sneak in to see it. Like, I really ended up liking it. And the fact that like she just washed it off, which I don't think is how this works, but like they did resolve it in a way that felt authentic to the story, and that she wasn't like, I don't know. Yeah. I feel tension about it a little bit, still a bit.
When I was watching it, I literally, like, when I first understood what she was doing, I think I literally said out loud to my screen, like, what the fuck are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing? And I think maybe it does play differently that this film is coming out this year, you know, where we all feel deeply like the importance of quarantine and all of that, and like why it might matter and so on. But there's also that, like, when I read those 2 reviews that both basically had the same reaction of like, what she does is so like unprofessional and like really shoots this whole film, you know, in the foot, like all of its feminist aims and everything. I also feel like there are times where we need to interrogate, like, what does professionalism mean? And like, right. How is professionalism like different for men and for women? And what are we expected all the time to sacrifice to the altar of professionalism? And like, yes, so it's like, yes, I mean, for all of its authenticity in its style and its like grounded portrayal of the training and everything, you know, as a film that is trying to like explore these ideas of like women and work and family and like priorities and love, you know, and a mother's love for her child and all of that, like, there's definitely like tension around that scene, but it also, it's hard now for me to imagine the film without it. Like, it feels like it's part of what gives this film the life that it has, for all of its kind of, for all the conflicted feelings I have around it. Like, I don't know. I don't know that like not doing it would have made for a better or more interesting film.
Yeah, I don't know either. My when it first becomes clear that she's sneaking out of the facility, my first thought was that she was leaving the program. She had decided not to go up, and so my heart just sank, you know, because I thought like she's gone through so much, and I know how much it tears her apart to consider being away from her daughter for a year. But I just was heartbroken at the idea that, you know, this close to realizing her dream, she was going to leave it behind. And then when it became clear that like she had actually was just sneaking out, but was planning to return, my reaction was very much colored by the fact that we are currently living through a pandemic. And I was just like, okay, first of all, this is on the Russians. Like, y'all can't make it that easy to get out of quarantine if it's that important, Because if it is, I guarantee you some of them other dudes have been sneaking out, getting cheeseburgers, sneaking back in. But also, I just thought, can you imagine, like, you go do this thing that's vitally important for you and your daughter. You make it back, you do the iodine scrub, and then you get into space, you're there for a year, and someone, like you actually have managed to bring germs up to the ISS and someone dies, like it just, I have to admit, there were moments where I was like, okay, this is larger than you, Sarah.
Yeah.
So I, yeah, but I recognize that the film itself is saying like, there's no easy answers here.
Right.
And so this is no matter what happens, there are no cut and dry easy answers, at least not for women who have to navigate this, in ways that, men simply do not have to navigate. So we see like Sarah talking with a psychologist with her daughter. And this is, the psychologist also comes to help, manage like, Stella's expectations and make sure she's settling well and everything. And I was like, man, it would be interesting to see whether the male astronauts who have families ever take advantage of that. Like, is that mandated? It would be interesting to see those conversations, or the conversations had with like the wives that they leave behind. Like, oh, okay, so your partner is going away for a year. What do you need?
Yeah.
Like, is any thought given to that?
Yeah.
No, there is not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, one last thing I just want to touch on that I appreciated about this film. It's a minor detail, but it really resonated with me. It, is like in all of its focus on the rigorous physical training and things that these people have to go through. It also touches on at least our emotional and psychological connections to Earth and to the world, because there's a bit where I think one of the astronauts is like recording like nature sounds to bring into space and things like that, right? Those things that like I think might in space just feel like a bit of a lifeline, a bit of a reminder of Earth as a home, and of like, because God, being in that space for that long, I'm sure without, seeing trees or, anything, can really have an effect. So I thought that was a really nice little acknowledgement and little moment there.
Yeah, I liked that too. It's very earthly for a space movie.
Sure is.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, we'll be right back with some freakouts. Something you can do today? You can head over to patreon.com/femfreak and become one of our patrons. That's right. If you back this podcast, not only are you helping us keep it on the air and keep feminist critical media criticism alive, but you also get loads of fun perks like early access to podcast episodes, very special bonus episodes, merch discounts. What else you got? We even let our patrons help us decide on new episodes and upcoming topics. So go ahead and check that out. Patreon.com/femfreak. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. I'm going to go first before we talk about politics, because I want to shout out Lindsay Ellis's Axiom's End book. It's thematically relevant in some ways because it's a book about an alien or aliens and, space stuff.
That's where aliens come from.
They come from space.
That's where they live.
Yeah.
It's the laws of space. I love this book. It is about, that's how I speak now. It is about, well, what is it about? I wish I had the description in front of me. There is there's a couple of things happening. One is which this woman, the main character, her father leaves the family and is on the run because he released documents, like national security documents, about aliens that the government was trying to cover up. And so he's like this revered, public figure now about how he's like, liberating knowledge and information. It's very Julian Assange.
Gross.
And yeah, kind of. He actually is kind of a skeezy character. And then what happens is this young woman gets caught up in the fact that this is actually true. Like the stuff that's happening is actually true. And hangs out with some aliens. So I'm being very reductive, but it's very good. I enjoyed it. It was like one of those reads that I couldn't put down. Like I just like stayed up all night and then finished reading it the next morning kind of thing because I enjoyed it so much. There's like some really low key Iron Giant vibes in it that I was like, oh shit, I know this was intentional because Lindsay Ellis is the kind of person that would intentionally have that kind of flavor to it. But anyways, I highly recommend it. It's a delightful book. And Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis.
Nice.
I love it.
All right, Carolyn.
Sure. Hey, so yeah, we talked in the intro about the election and everything, and boy, I just obviously things are still very uncertain in the sense that we all know Biden won the election. We all know it was legitimate. We know that it was by a not by any stretch insignificant margin or any of those things. So maybe I'm getting ahead of. Given that Trump hasn't conceded or whatever, and the uncertainty of the moment we're in, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. But what I'm already sort of deeply frustrated and exhausted by in the past few days is, and I knew this was coming. Like I think all of us on the left, all of us who identify as progressives, knew this was coming. But already there has been a concerted effort from certain segments of the Democratic Party leadership, and certainly from Republicans and like the Lincoln Project folks, to frame the results of the election to say that progressives almost cost Democrats the election, and to suggest that like the only path forward for Democrats is to move even further center or rightward from their current position, essentially. And and there's a lot of rhetoric on Twitter and stuff, people saying like it's time for Democrats to understand Trumpists and understand those who voted for Trump. And first of all, it is always framed as incumbent on us, the marginalized, the poor, the Black people, trans people, etc. People who are in any way marginalized, always incumbent on us to understand and to forgive, and to compromise with our oppressors, basically, and never. And it's always framed as agitation. It's always framed as conflict when, as what's happened to AOC and others in the past few days, when they say, hey, no, actually, progressives won you this election, and the mobilization of Black voters and Native voters and these strategies, and those strategies are what won you the election, and it's time to move. It's time to stop that shift and to actually move in this direction. And progressive candidates actually across the board did better than their more centrist candidates, and so on and so forth. That is framed as conflict, as being asking for too much, being entitled, generating conflict within the party. But it's never framed as generating conflict. It's never framed as unacceptable when the centrists say, we need to move further to the right. And I have a lot of reasons to be hopeful. The squad, as it's called, is getting bigger. I mean, Cori Bush won her election this time around. She's fantastic, and progressive voices are louder and more numerous than they ever have been before. And there is some, power for me as a poor person and a trans person, just in even hearing my concerns be part of the national political conversation now in ways that they weren't, 10 years ago, whatever, under Obama or under Clinton or certainly under Bush the second or whatever. But my fear as I see and my exhaustion with the tendency with Democratic leadership, who are, of course, by and large wealthy centrists who have a vested interest in maintaining status quo politics. My exhaustion and frustration with them is just boundless, and this is a moment that demands a shift to the left, and I hope that Democrats finally recognize that and stop kind of shooting themselves in the foot and trying to appeal to people who are never going to support them or vote for them or embrace their politics.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Here. Preach. No, I got nothing to add,
I think that I'm also equally frustrated as many. Yes. I'm curious about the analysis of voters that comes out once all of the votes are actually tallied, because what we saw is that white people still overwhelmingly voted for Trump in similar numbers to the 2016 election, right? That it was people of color that came out, and particularly women that came out and pushed numbers, right? And I think that Carolyn, what you're talking about is clearly the folks who are most affected by the oppressive policies of the United States government over the last forever, right? Not just under Trump, but literally forever, are I don't know what I'm saying. Basically, they need to get their heads out of their asses, because it's that people are really demanding huge change and seeing it more than ever. And they think that they won the election because of Biden, but really people just fucking voted for Trump again. They just voted for Trump again, right?
Yeah, and I think many of those who voted for Biden were voting for him to defeat Trump, not because they are excited about Biden.
We're excited about it. Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm also very frustrated by that. And literally, I think it was on Friday or something. What's her face? Nancy Pelosi made a statement privately, I guess, if it's believed or true, whatever, just being y'all need to run the line and be centrist to win Georgia, because don't push it, don't push it, or else we're going to lose Georgia, and then we're going to lose the Senate, which is a big deal. The Democrats losing the Senate will be a very, very big deal. But
can you imagine being one of the, Black female organizers on the ground in Georgia that delivered Georgia, that shift that fucking state blue, to have Nancy Pelosi, who, if she gets another 2 years as Speaker of the House, I'm gonna lose my shit, but to be no, what you need to do is cater more to the white vote that is already left behind. Listen, Democrats have not carried the white vote since, I think, 1964. So it is way past time
what
for
are
us
they
to
doing?
reconsider that as an electoral strategy. It makes absolutely no sense. One of the things that I'm really heartened by, and I've been following the discussion by a lot of really smart Latinx writers, is the unpacking and the untangling of this myth of Latinidad, right? And so there was all this hand wringing about Cuban votes for Trump in Florida in particular, and so people oh, what's behind this Latino surge for Trump and whatever? And I was oh no, wait a minute now, this is where you get into trouble, looping all of these different people from all of these different national backgrounds, all of these different racial affiliations. We really need to untangle that. We can only benefit by being more nuanced and being more specific about who we're talking about, what we're talking about, and in the ways that we've already done for white voters. When we talk about white voters, we talk about the white working class, white college educated, white women from the suburbs, people in urban versus rural areas. But when we talk about the Black vote, it's the Black vote. It's the Latino vote,
right?
Yes, and it's past time that we start to pull that apart.
Yeah, totally. I think that it's Biden's win is extremely fraught for so many of us because nobody actually fucking likes him, right? Like none of us were excited to cast that vote, or we just wanted Trump out, right? Like that at the end of the day, like that is the win, that Trump is no longer going to be president for another 4 years. But I really urge everyone to understand that we elected a old white dude that is a career politician that's deeply rooted in pro-war neoliberal philosophies, right? Like not having Trump isn't enough, right? And I'm really also tired of people being like, well, we got to get a Democrat in because we can fight for like we can, as the left, we can like push back Democrats and get them to do the things that we want them to do, which is what you say every fucking election, and it never works. So like, I just need us to be really mindful of the energy that we have had, if we've had any, to really challenge the policies and the rhetoric that came out of the White House for the last 4 years. Like, we need to hold that kind of like that gaze, I guess, you know, like the seeing everything and knowing about everything and being on top of everything and challenging it as much as we can, because like, y'all, America's not a good place, and it wasn't a good place before Trump. Like,
right.
I don't,
right.
You know, it just wasn't. And so I don't want to take away from anyone's like relief or joy to have Trump out of office, but like, Biden is not a fucking savior. And neither is Kamala. And like, y'all celebrate all you want about having a woman of color in office, which I think is very important and notable, but like, she's got some questionable shit. And we need to be mindful of overly celebrating folks who hold a lot of power over our lives.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I'm so tired, y'all.
Yeah. It's you know, I think I said last week, like the go back, I can go back to brunch now crowd, you know, fuck off forever. Like, because you all have to know that for so many of us, you know, the status quo politics, we weren't doing great under Obama. Like we've never been doing great under late capitalism, under the you know, increased prevalence of the gig economy, of vast income inequality, you know, and so on and so forth. And like the center will not hold. We see it all collapsing even more rapidly now than we did then, and we can't, you know, business as usual stuff is just absolutely not going to cut it at this point, because shit is fucking falling apart and millions of us are in crisis.
A friend of mine tweeted or posted about how she's getting like 2016 PTSD feelings about how like all of a sudden all of these white people in our lives were like, oh, things are bad. And you're just
right.
like, oh, shut the fuck up. Seriously? Like, you're here now? So like all of those people who have been so enraged, who were, you know, politically radicalized during that moment, like, y'all need to stay here.
Exactly.
Right? Like, y'all need to still be here and still hold those feelings that you have, because like, there is going to be a continual deluge of horrible things that are going to come out of the administration, whether foreign policy, domestic policy, healthcare, environmental. Like, it's I don't know. I know I just said I'm tired, but like it's a lot. It's a lot to hold all of this.
And I do recognize that people are feeling a profound sense of relief. And I don't want to come in and be the person who like peas in the Cheerios, you know? But yeah, I'm like you. We want people to be aware that the work is not done. It's not even close to being done. And so, yes, it's nice to take a break, you know, and, you know, catch our breath without being inundated by nonstop, you know, political propaganda. But that doesn't mean that the politics of our lives stops. So
yeah.
Take the break that you need to, but remember that the fight goes on. And, you know, one of the things that has been really great is the way that like young people in particular and really disenfranchised groups have really embraced working on the local level in a way that, for me anyway, feels greatly expanded in this last election. So it was much less about like, oh, we're getting out the vote we're shaping like this national conversation, but it was people saying like, no, I'm focusing on Georgia. I'm focusing on Atlanta. I'm focused on DeKalb County, whatever, like getting at that hyperlocal stuff and making those changes, working with voters there. And we see what the end result was, all of those local efforts coming together to get this result.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the conversation started with Carolyn acknowledging that, like, all I'm sure you all saw these tweets going around too about how, like, okay, now it's time to like understand the adversaries, right? Like now it's time to understand. And we were just like, what the fuck? Like, no, now is not the time for that. Now is the time to like, what I think you're saying is like, get local, understand our communities, like really understand what we need to like make it through. I will say I'm extremely disappointed in California. Like, some of the propositions that got passed or didn't get passed is real. I mean, we don't have time to go into all of that right now, but like we failed. Like this state fucking failed when it came to progressive politics, and whatever. All right, Carolyn, were you gonna add?
No, I mean, just real quickly on that. I think Prop 22's passage. I mean, it's absolutely lamentable and it's horrible, but it's also a prime example of how powerful money is in politics. Like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and whatever put so much money into supporting that proposition, and like that's I think to me it's just an indication of like why we need to get like just massive corporate money out of politics, because it has such sway that it's very difficult to organize against the power of like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Just for folks, Prop 22 was actually a ballot initiative that those companies put forward, and then spent millions of dollars to lie about, and it was to make sure that they could continue to hire and exploit contractors as opposed to not being forced to have employees.
Exactly, and it has far-reaching ramifications for gig workers. Like I think potentially all over the country. I don't know. It seems bad.
I mean, this is such a huge problem with the way the proposition system works in California that, like, literally I sat down to vote and I was like, I don't fucking know what any of these things are. Like, they're worded in ways that are deceptive. We don't know what they are. Like, the only way to understand them is, like, to read from, like, unions and organizations that you trust where they're voting on it. Like, we are asking voters to vote on things that they have no education around that are going to have huge ramifications on the public in the state. And we need a different system to get some of these really important things passed in our government and not have it be down to like, I don't know what I feel like, but I'm just voting right now, so I'm just going to check a box.
Right.
Anyways, I have a lot of feelings. But I will not share anymore, and we will wrap this shit up. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Just a heads up, our bonus episode this week is a discussion of the remaining episodes of Lovecraft Country. And that episode will be available to all of our backers of this podcast. So you can learn more and join us at patreon.com/femfreak. The show is engineered by Rob Parra. Carrie Stimpson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.